Is it deja vu all over again? The United Nations nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, claims in a new report that Iran is moving ever closer to possessing a nuclear weapon. Critics of the report claim nothing new or even damning has been revealed. Nonetheless, the drumbeat of war against Iran can be heard loud and clear. Crosstalk Iran's nuclear program. I'm joined by Mark Levine in Washington. He's a senior fellow with the Truman National Security Project and talk radio host. From Rutgers University in New Jersey, we have Hushan Amir Ahmadi. He is a professor of international development and policy. And in London, we cross to Patrick Hayes. He's a journalist and political commentator. All right, gentlemen, this is Crosstalk. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I very much encourage it. But first, Masha, we're calling this program Iran Deja Vu. Appropriate?
I think rightfully so, absolutely. Concerns over Iran's nuclear program have been growing steadily for more than a decade, with Western countries like the United States and Israel expressing suspicion that the program could be used to develop nuclear weapons. With the recent report by the UN Atomic Agency, these concerns could be nearing a diplomatic turning point. The report, issued last week, has unloaded what some believe to be a trove of intelligence showing that up until 2003, Tehran was pursuing weapons-related activities, including research on nuclear warheads. It is the first report of its kind that claims to offer explicit support for allegations that have so far remained uncorroborated.
For us, there is no reason not to believe what the IAEA has been saying, especially because it effectively confirms the concerns that were already existing and were already recognized by the UN.
The U.S., joined by France and Britain, are now considering a range of options, in addition to the 4 rounds of sanctions already in place against Iran. Options that Israel has warned could include a military strike. Meanwhile, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has been defiant, promising not to yield to the pressure and calling the findings fraudulent.
The Americans have fabricated a few papers and given them to the IAEA chief. And he speaks here and there about these papers. Why don't they even publish one report on the United States? Why don't they publish even one report on the friends of the United States?
Iran maintains that its program is meant to obtain nuclear energy for electricity only. But the U.S. and its Western allies are worried a nuclear-armed Iran could lead to a regional arms race and poses a direct threat to Israel.
What most people do not realize that even China and India, that are considered less enthusiastic for sanctions, are extremely worried because an aggressive Iran, nuclear Iran, can threaten hundreds and millions of people in these countries.
However, because the report fails to state whether Iran's efforts have resumed or tapered off since 2003, there's still no concrete reason to think it poses a genuine threat. Likewise, the report does not indicate whether Iran possesses weapons-grade enriched uranium or the capacity to produce it. To that end, talk of military strikes could be premature, unless justifying this type of action was the report's original purpose. And that is what everybody's talking about.
Well, let's talk about what everyone's talking about. Hushan, if I could go to you at Rutgers University, this IAEA report, we've had a little bit of time now, almost a week now, to digest it. Is it all hype or is it alarming? Take a side.
Well, it's hype, really. I mean, I read the report several times and then compared that to the previous report. There is very little new in this report, a lot of repetitious statements and a lot of accusations that really doesn't hold. After all, IAEA it really violates its own law of transparency. It does not cite the sources that it has used to put this together. Second, IAEA is claiming that something was happening back in 2003, before 2003, but it is not really saying that after that, that it has any information. It says may, the word may, M-A-Y, is used over and over, that it may be developing an explosive device. And anywhere it talks about the militarization of this programs, the Iran's nuclear programs, it basically uses the word possibility. Possibility.
Okay, this sounds like there's a lot of hypotheticals in this report. Okay, all right, Mark, what do you think about that?
The IAEA report is more than 1,000 pages with intelligence from more than 10 countries, and it shows in detail not just that Iran is 4/5 of the way to developing a highly enriched uranium program, but that it has 14 separate designs for installing the nuclear warhead on its medium-range missiles that can reach virtually everywhere in the Middle East. No one can dispute that the Iranian nuclear program is out there for a nuclear bomb, least of which the leaders of Iran, who keep saying they want to annihilate Israel. Saudi Arabia is scared. After all, this is the country that just tried to kill the Saudi ambassador in the United States in a terrorist attack.
Well,
this will lead to a nuclear arms race.
That's alleged, okay? Patrick, it seems to me,
gentlemen,
I got to go to Patrick first before we really jump in here. Patrick in London, it seems to me, and I'm not going to take a side here, but it seems to me that instead of really looking at Iran, everyone's looking at the IAEA, and it's cast a huge shadow over itself, because if we compare it to the last report over the last head of the nuclear watchdog, this one seems amazingly politicized. And as Mark pointed out, 10 countries provided information to this report, but those countries are not mentioned whatsoever.
No, I think really this report does go to show just how political the IAEA is. And I really want to go back to fundamentals to start off and really ask, well, what is this officious UN-affiliated body doing in Iran in the first place? I don't think it has any real business there. I would like to kind of say from the outset, really, I think weapons inspections, and we see this going from 2003 to now, really, are playing a much broader role in the way in which Western countries now intervene in countries such as Iran. Then I think really what you get is the worst of both worlds. You get kind of Western intervention, but they do it in a very dishonest way. So they try and do it in this neutral kind of way through using these kind of arms like the UN, like the IAEA, to go in and basically poke their noses around sovereign countries and interfere. And I think they should back out completely. And actually, I think in many ways, this kind of intervention will put on hold a lot of the uprisings that we've seen in the Middle East and could potentially prevent, you know, the Arab Spring from developing any further.
Okay, Mark, you seem very disapproving. Go right ahead.
I definitely am. Look, the IAEA has performed a tremendous function here, and it's very careful. You should be very careful to note that this is a United Nations body. The IAEA, for example, very clearly said that Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction, and on that basis, many Americans like myself very much opposed the Iraq war. Now they're telling us that Iran is hell-bent on developing a nuclear weapon, and I'm inclined to believe them. And if you're worried about the Arab Spring, if you're worried about the Persian people, the people who are doing the Green Revolution, we know that if their government develops a nuclear weapon, there is no way they will finally achieve democracy, freedom for women, and rights in Iran. Listen, if Gaddafi had nuclear weapons, I'm sure the Libyan people wouldn't have achieved democracy either.
Let's separate.
Okay, Hushan, go ahead, jump in.
Mark, I think let's make the distinction between Iran domestic issues and its international matters very clear here. That's the Iranian people's business. They want to overthrow the regime or otherwise. That's a different business. We are talking about Iran's nuclear program. First, let me say that I am against weaponization and nuclear programs, and you know, I mean, for military purpose in the Middle East, including Israel and including Iran and Pakistan and India and elsewhere. Let's put that on the table. But the point here is that this particular report that we are talking had created more commotion and sensation that it really offers in real terms. And I think the IAEA, as I said, violates its rules of transparency. It must come clean and bring and tell the world who these sources are, what the countries have provided these resources. And beyond that, I think if IAEA really is interested in coming to an end, to a clean solution with Iran, it really has to promote Mr. Lavrov's plan. Lavrov, foreign minister of Russia, he has put an incredible plan, a workable plan on the table for the United States, Iran, and 5+1. We know for a fact that Iran has accepted the basic frameworks of that plan. The U.S. has accepted. In fact, within that plan, Iran accepted to go along and approve the additional protocol of the UN.
Okay. Hushan, if we can stick with, Mark, I'm sorry. Hushan, if I can go to Mark here. I mean, the New York Times reported that the head of the IAEA actually went to the White House and presented his findings 12 days before it was released. I mean, why does the U.S. get to check it off first? I mean, it's the IAEA, it's the United Nations body. Why is only one party given access to it, or is it to check, make sure the outcome is right? I mean, it does look a bit suspicious here.
I don't see it as much suspicious at all. Look, if anyone's going to take military action, it will probably be the United States, and that's why the United States has the strongest encouragement to seek sanctions so that we don't have to rely on the last resort, which is military action. President Obama ran for president and said that Iran will not become a nuclear power. Now, either President Obama will keep his promise or he won't, but the IAEA wants to make sure, I think, that the United States is on board, and I don't think that process is the big deal. I do want to answer Hushan's point, though, about domestic interests in Iran, and the reason why they're important is that whatever you think of Pakistan, India, or Israel, these are democracies. These are countries controlled by their people. In Iran, you have a country, a government that very much imposes on its people. The Persian people want freedom. They don't want this dictatorship. They don't want to have women treated as second-class citizens.
Mark,
they are likely to overthrow their government.
Mark, before we go to the break, I'd like to ask Mark a question before we go to the break. Okay, that's all nice and fine what you said about democracy, but the nuclear program in Iran is actually quite popular with the population.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, right? Whenever you have a dictatorship, it's very difficult to trust polls. I think the Libyan people are quite happy that Gaddafi did not have nuclear weapons, and I think that if the Iranian government has nuclear weapons, it's a really sad day for the Persian people above all.
Okay, Patrick, do you want to jump in? Go ahead.
First up,
Patrick, go ahead.
Quickly, I was very struck by the fact that Mark seems very happy to speak on behalf of the Iranian people. I think they should speak on their behalf. They should rise up and overthrow.
They are. They're revolting. And the government's putting them down.
And I think a sustained war.
Patrick, I'm going to jump in here. We'll come right back to you after our short break. And after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on Iran. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're talking about Iran and its nuclear program. Okay, Patrick, I want to go back to you because you had the last point to make on the first half of the program. One of the things I think is very interesting here is, and I'll be a little bit provocative and I want to see how you guys react to it, but it's really, looking at the report, it's not really an analysis of Iran's nuclear program. It's a case to go to war against it.
Well, I do think that the IAEA and, as I said, other weapons inspectors bodies are playing an increasingly important role in effectively paving the way towards potential war. I think that was very evident with the Iraq war, with the formulation of the dodgy dossier. I know that the IAEA weren't directly involved with that, but the former Director General Hans Blix certainly was, who did a lot of the inspections in Iraq and headed that up. But I guess more fundamentally, I just wanted to make this point. I do think, the fact that the US were given privileged access for anyone else to this report, the fact that actually the IAEA is nominally independent but does ultimately just answer to the UN and also to Obama, the fact that actually this is being considered in the first place as a legitimate thing, that an international body can start to effectively poke its nose in other countries' business, recommend the imposition of sanctions, and effectively start to talk, as Mark started to do, on behalf of the Iranian people and saying this isn't in their interests. Well, actually, they should be able to determine what's in their interests.
Let's talk about whose interest this is all about. Right before the report came out, Mark, I want to talk to you in Washington. We had a scandal coming out of the Israeli cabinet about Netanyahu trying to get members of his coalition government on board for an attack on Iran, and then the report comes out. I mean, maybe that's psych ops or something like that, but it certainly can't be a coincidence. And Israel has been itching for the U.S. to bomb, to destroy the nuclear program that is there in Iran for a long time now. I mean, is this coming to an head?
Well, first of all, it's silly to presume the IAEA is a tool of anyone. As I noted, in the Iraq War, the IAEA made very clear against the United States government, then controlled by President Bush, that Iraq did not have nuclear or any weapons of mass destruction. Bush went to war anyway. So the IAEA is not a tool of the United States. Look, a war is coming unless Iran's nuclear weapons program is stopped. It's that simple. It may be from Israel, it may be from the United States, it may be from Saudi Arabia, it may be from the UAE. It may just be
you're assuming that they do have a program.
Is to do sanctions now.
Okay, Hushan, let's go to Rutgers University. Go ahead.
The IAEA the IAEA that went against Mr. Bush in Iraq was headed by Mr. al-Baradei. And that very Mr. al-Baradei, in an interview in Times Magazine, flatly said that Iran has never had, as far as he is concerned, a program designed toward militarization. So the same IAEA that went against Mr. Bush, the same IAEA now has said that Iran doesn't have that militarization program. This is a completely different
No, it's not the same IAEA, as you know.
By a completely different person.
Patrick, go ahead.
Patrick,
let Patrick jump in. Gentlemen, let's go to Patrick in London.
What we're seeing is kind of scaremongering here. Basically, war is imminent unless Iran stops building nuclear weapons. No, it's not. Ultimately, it needs to be for the US and Israel to decide whether or not they decide to declare war on Iran. Just the fact that it does build nuclear weapons doesn't necessarily mean they're going to use them. And who is it really for the US, Israel, the West to decide who or who doesn't develop nuclear weapons in many ways? I mean, why shouldn't it be for those sovereign countries to make those decisions? I just wanted to make this point because I think what we're seeing here really is a modern form of colonialism from these countries. They're using weapons inspections agencies, the UN, etc., to keep down these countries that they see to be disobedient, unruly, not trustworthy of possessing these kind of weapons. I think that's really problematic.
Patrick,
it speaks to this kind of old form colonial mentality.
Race. It's got nothing to do with colonialism. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Turkey. You're going to have all these countries develop nuclear weapons. You're going to have a nuclear arms race.
Gentlemen, let me jump in here. Gentlemen,
the only people
please let me jump in here.
Bomb is America.
Gentlemen, let me jump in here. Mark, if I can go to you, I'd like to read a very short, one sentence from the report. To date, Iran has not provided the agency access to the heavy water stored at the uranium conversion facility in order to take samples. Now, that's an accusation here. But if you check, heavy water production is not covered by Iran's safeguards agreement. I mean, it's saying Iran is doing things that it shouldn't be doing, but it's not true. I mean, the fact of the matter is there are certain things that don't fall under agreements that Iran has signed, but they're still accused of not being cooperative. I mean, it's a blatant mistake in the report.
Iran has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
And it's also signed, a safeguards agreement, an additional, the most scrutinized nuclear program in history.
And Iran, well, except that Iran is not allowing the IAEA to scrutinize that program. Look, if Iran had a peaceful program, originally they said they were going to take their lower enriched uranium, ship it to Russia for processing, that it could only be used for peaceful purposes. Whatever happened to that idea? Well, Iran recognized that they've actually shipped it off. They couldn't develop their nuclear warheads. The IAEA has made very clear in a very, very detailed, and if you haven't read those appendixes in the 14 pages as they show the design of the Iranian warhead and how the nuclear bomb could be put in that warhead. I mean, I think you're living in a dream world. And the thing is that the other countries in the region, and it's not just Israel, and Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, and Egypt, and Turkey, and soon you will have a massive nuclear arms race in the Middle East with a lot of terrorist groups.
Okay, well, there's only one country. I'd like to go to Husham. I'd like to go to Husham because there's one country in the region that does have nuclear weapons, and it's Israel. Go ahead. Husham, in Rutgers University. Go ahead.
Okay, first Iran has responded in detail about those quote-unquote studies that dealt with the building a nuclear device or weapons of the military stuff. That has been already, IAEA already has those informations very clearly.
Hushan, why does Iran need nuclear weapons?
If IAEA,
why do they need them?
That's a good question.
No,
I mean, who's threatening to attack Iran? The only time Iran would get attacked is if it develops nuclear weapons. Why don't they just give them up?
My friend, you cannot tell a country not to do any studies for any reason. I mean, the fact
you
that
can tell a country not to develop nuclear weapons.
It doesn't mean they're building it. No. I mean, so then stop.
Of course they're building it. Why do they need it? They have all the energy they need.
Gentlemen, that's a very good question. Hang on here. Hang on, everybody. Patrick.
I am a professor.
Patrick, let me go to Patrick in London. Okay, look, I mean, there are thousands of troops on both sides, American troops on both sides of Iran. There's a very strong American fleet to the south, okay? And it's being threatened constantly with attack and maybe even evasion. So, I mean, if I were part of the political elite in Tehran, I would probably want a nuclear weapon because, you know, if you don't, then you fall down the path of what, Iraq, Libya? I mean, no wonder North Korea has gone down that path. I mean, I'm just saying that countries act rationally in their own national interests.
Yeah, I think they do. And I think in many ways it wouldn't necessarily be in Iran's interest to develop a nuclear bomb because, I mean, as they point out at the time, if they had one or two, then obviously they could be completely obliterated by Israel and the US, etc. Right. I think what we're seeing here to an extent is an erosion of kind of moral authority from the West in many ways. They now feel they need the IAEA or other inspectors to go into these countries and effectively build up this evidence base that allows them to intervene in one way or another. Why can't they? It just speaks to America's lack of confidence, I think, in many ways, that it no longer feels it has the moral authority to intervene. But even so, I think that moral authority is very problematic. What we're doing here is when we're saying, oh, there might be an arms race, or the UAE may want to develop nuclear weapons, other countries in that region might do, it's basically saying the only people who are civilised enough to possess nuclear weapons or this kind of power are the kind of superiors in the West. I think that's a very patronising assumption.
And one country in the world has actually used them. And one has actually used them. The United States has used those weapons. Okay.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Mark,
go ahead. Mark, go ahead in Washington.
I think the mistake that Patrick and Hushan are making is they're conflating the Iranian government with the country of Iran. And they say Iran is if the government represented the people of Iran. They do not. The people are very much trying to overthrow their dictatorship. The Persian people happen to be some of the most pro-Western, pro-Israel, pro-democracy, pro-women's rights people in the Middle East. But they are being put down by their own government. And I fear that their own government may well use nuclear weapons to put their own people down. Democracies having nuclear weapons is one thing. When a dictatorship has them, it leads to a far more dangerous world.
Hushan, go ahead.
That's
all right.
Just Mark. Just first.
All right, Hushan, go ahead.
Please understand there is no Persian people. There are Iranian people. Persian also is a small one group of the ethnic community there. So that's Iranian, not Persian. That's number one. Second, in fact, those Iranian people are also, I'm sorry? Those Iranian people are also
the same people, the Iranian people, the Persian people.
Sanctions. They are suffering from American sanctions, from Israeli war threats. They are suffering from the regime. Yes, you are absolutely right. The point here is this. I believe if the United States wanted Iran to build nuclear weapon, it is trying to do its best to do it. I mean, what the U.S. is doing, what Israelis are doing, are really pushing the Islamic Republic toward weaponization. I think there is a plot out there to move the Islamic Republic in that direction. Let me explain to you. Let me explain. Mr. Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, has put a plan on the table. The plan says, let's work a deal between the 5+1 and Iran on an incremental basis, under which Iran will suspend its illicit activities and the U.S. will lift sanctions. Now, in part of that plan, Iran has accepted to ratify the additional protocol. It has accepted
but
to go along
why won't Iran give its nuclear materials to Russia for processing the way they promised they would?
It will be part of that. They have accepted to send that spent fuel to Russia. They have accepted any. Hold on.
All right, gentlemen, we're fastly running out of time here. Patrick, I want to give you the last word in the program.
All I am saying is that
how is this all going to end? Is this just a drumbeat to war? Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm quite gobsmacked by Mark's kind of assumption that he can speak on behalf of the Iranian people, you know, better than they can. You know, he seems as some kind of guardian of the Iranian people who can't be seen to actually take their own initiative and actually overthrow the governments themselves. I think any intervention that the West makes into Iran is going to put any kind of potential uprising or Arab Spring in Iran on hold.
All right, gentlemen, we've run out of time. We'll see where this goes. Many thanks to my guests today in London, Washington, and at Rutgers University, New Jersey. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules.